Hey, hi, good afternoon. Joe Wenberg, Bluebird Semaphore, and today I'm going to try to use this. I put this up last one. This is World History for Ordinary People 25, and I think in 24 I put this up. And I'm going to try to use it today a little bit, and I'll try to improve on how I show these things geographically in the future. But before we do that, I wanted to read a very brief excerpt from this book I have here. And I'm going to have to get my glasses because it's a little dark here. And I need glasses. So we're putting the glasses on. Hopefully everybody's well. Alright, so we're putting the glasses on, and what this fellow's doing, this is Colin Thorbrand, and I mentioned this book before, To a Mountain in Tibet. I'm just very briefly going to read 2 or 3 lines, and I hope nobody minds that I'm doing that. But, and the reason why I find these lines so important, that I have to do this, is when I was reading this, I thought, I finally understand what they mean, what the meaning is with all that Eastern mystical thinking that goes on in places like Tibet and India, that mystical thinking that, I could never comprehend no matter how much I read these people and what they say about their mysticism. So I read this passage. Oh man, that's it. This hits the nail on the head. But anyway, what he's talking about is these folks that are tulkas, and I believe what tulkas are monks who have had past life that they had a Buddha incarnation in them. And then those people die, and then that incarnation passes to another person, another monk. And they're together in these monasteries, all these people with these past incarnations in them. And so what he says is, I stare at him. He's talking about a particular Tulka. I stare at him across a deep divide. He has the moon face of Tibetan calm, regular and stressless. Its lips upturned faintly like those of a statued Buddha. These reincarnations to him are conduits of an enlightenment that springs like a flame from candle to candle, man to man. They are almost always men, these monks. The precise nature of the flame, the continence, the psyche, spirit, memory, is uncertain. But the Tulka, as its holder, is the envoy of a changeless purity. So I read that, and at the moment I read it, I said, this is it. It's talking about these people, and they gathered together, and this embodiment is moving from them as if they were a candle, they were a flame, and the spirit and the psyche was moving. And they were the embodiment of this mystical concept of the world, creation, so on and so forth. So I thought for a minute I really understood what I had been reading about for many years, trying to read about Eastern philosophy, so to speak, although it's really a mixture of philosophy and theology and mysticism and so on. So, but then, no, 15 minutes later, it was all out of my mind. I didn't understand or comprehend anything anymore. And I basically still don't. I'm back to square one. But, maybe somebody else can pick up this book, read that little passage, and see some of what I'm talking about. But today we're going to get back to East Asia. And in this discussion with East Asia, by the way, a few back, I talked about the deforestation that was decreed by the emperor 1000 BC in China, that they would deforest and they would make more land for agriculture, which they did. And, in a way, I defamed them somewhat. Not nice to kill all your trees and all that, and then just absolutely ruin the land. And so I left it at that. But then along came the good old National Geographic magazines, and it was a couple, one from 1937 and one from 1945. Well, the one from 1937 had an article in it about the Grand Canal in China, and I've talked about the Grand Canal in China before, I'm sure, but the Grand Canal is a hybrid man-made and lakes and rivers connected with handmade canals, ditches that were dug between natural rivers and lakes that were going in the direction they wanted, which was basically from the south up to the north. They had to get the agricultural products from the south up to the north where the population was. And this system, man-made system, 1,000 miles long, it's the longest of its kind in the world. I'm sure I said that. But whenever I would think about the Grand Canal, in my illusions, I always had it as a green, lush excursion of waterways through wonderful green lands, And so the magazine in 1937 had lots of photographs of spots along the Grand Canal. And it was nothing like that, green and lush. It was basically eroded land, rocks, salt, this sandy, clayey rocks, very little vegetation. And that's what it seems the Grand Canal was. So I said, hey, there it is. These people, they did this to them. Essentially, 3,000 years earlier, they did it to themselves. And it then underscored it because they showed a picture of a Chinese woman cooking the meal for a family on a very small stove, but the fuel had to be straw. They didn't even have any wood for their cooking part. They had to use straw, and they had to cook real quick because straw doesn't last that long in a fire. So once again, I said, oh, look at these people. No, bad. And yet, I think it was in the 1945 edition when the war is essentially almost over and the United States is giving some scientific help to China, and they wanted to try to reforest at least some of the land. And what they designed, and I think it's ingenious, and I don't know why the rest of the world isn't doing it, but they designed a little a pellet, okay? And in that pellet there was the seed of the tree they wanted to grow. There was fertilizer, and I think there was soil packed in it. So it was a nice compact little ball. And they make hundreds of thousands of these, and they drop them from the sky, and they reforest an area of the world. Now, the article never said anything about they went on and did it, but there were some mentions of some smaller scale reforestation taking place. So I have to now give them their props for doing that. I can't just say they were bad. 1000 BC, they cut down all the trees. Now it's 3,000 years later, they're trying to do something about it. So good for them. Get those trees growing. Now, but the overall point here is to get into East Asian history, okay? And the one thing that keeps cropping up in the beginning is the Silk Road. I mean, it just never ending the people who want to write about and talk about the Silk Road. And I think, particularly now, the Silk Road seems to be a very popular topic. So, for lack of any other book to pull off the shelf at the library that is now open, but reduced hours and all that stuff, and not the major branch, so it doesn't have a lot of books, it has some books. So, one of the books was really heavily concentrated on the Silk Road. So I said, well, listen, I gotta read that anyway because it's part of the history. And lo and behold, I'm not East Asia. If we look at my map, this is pretty much East Asia over here. That's East Asia. But I have to start way back here, places like Persia, okay, and the Caucasus, okay, Asia Minor, even over into Eastern Europe, and to talk and dig and dig and dig what was going on then, pertinent to the Silk Road. The Silk Road was, of course, people were doing their trading, their caravans, even in the BC era. They were always doing it. The camels were going up and down these paths, these routes. And so the particular author that I'm reading feels this is where to start. And he makes the claim over and over that while the West is living in somewhat reduced circumstances, these guys in the East were living in a gigantic civilization. And the people in the West wanted their goods, and they would trade with these folks all around here in Persia. We talked about Merv last time, which is east of the Caspian Sea. And yet, the driving force was always trade. And more likely than not, it was the goods of the East that were the desirable goods they wanted, particularly silk, which I've mentioned, and other things. So, while all this is going on, 400 AD, you got the Huns coming out of here. See where I'm pointing to? It's west of the Caspian Sea, a little area like this. I'd never seen it before. The Huns come out and they do everything to Europe, right? 100 years later, they're pretty much gone. But and I'm going to jump ahead quite a bit, but part of this trade included the Vikings and their descendants, so that and this is going on 400, the Hun thing is 400. The Vikings, by about 800 or 900, were doing major trading down the rivers from the Baltic Sea down to the Black Sea. Okay, there was all these rivers, and the Vikings were getting on, and they were doing very successful trading, very. And eventually, they get the name Viking Rus, and they spread all over this area. Okay, and they intermix with the people that are there. This is a lot of Slavic over here. I don't know if you can read this, but you get the general idea where I'm pointing. So these Viking Rus, they lay down the foundation for folks that are eventually going to be the Russians. Not pure Vikings, because they've all intermixed by now. Okay? And the people here start to become a major force, although they've been a major force for a long time. They become a major force, and then after a 200 or 300 year process of this Viking stuff going on, we get the Moors are moving in. They've moved in now. They've been here for a pretty long time, and the West is getting it fed up They want to take their cities and states back. They see some openings, and they have the First Crusade, right? And the First Crusade is actually successful. They take back Jerusalem, but they did it all wrong. They did a lot of problems. And before you know it, the Moors got all of that back. And it was all downhill from there. And by the way, the stories you've heard about the Crusaders, the First Crusade, being atrocious and absolutely horrible to the people within the walls of Jerusalem, they're true. They're true. And the people in there, if I'm not mistaken, were not just Arab Moors. There were Christians and there were Jews in there. But these Crusaders killed everybody. Terrible. And it's repeated many times, but not just by the Crusaders, all of them. I mean, I think it was one of the sons of Genghis Khan, who we'll get to, when he attacked Merv, M-E-R-V, one of the observers of that reported that when it was done, everybody was killed. Everybody was killed. And he felt that it was 1.3 million people, all killed, all laid up in big piles outside the walls of Merv, M-E-R-V, which was a major trading center back the 13th century, the 12th century. Genghis Khan century is the 13th century, is the 13th, 12, 20 in there. And his son, of course, a few years later. But they all did it. But within this, well, no matter how much killing is going on, the trade always went on. You will not stop the trade. The trade keeps going on, keeps going on. So, I haven't recently got to Kublai Khan, which we will, again, and I'm sure I've talked about him before, but these were Mongols, of course, and they came from Mongolia, pretty much what I would call outer Mongolia, these Mongolian tribes. But what the Huns didn't do, and what many other of these raiders and warriors didn't do, even the Crusaders didn't do, they didn't take over a people and that was the end of it. No, they took over, they made sure what was remaining in that city, town, could still farm, could still have industry, the trade was going on, they had government, they had coinage. So the Mongols, even though you would think that they'd be the last to do something correct because of their barbarian ways, they did it right. And so these places lasted for a pretty long time. However, nothing lasts forever, right? And right on their heels, the Chinese are getting bigger and stronger, and eventually, and they're pushing west and west and west. So they pretty much win the overall battle for that. But this whole area now, which is northwest China, okay, northwest China, I'm going to make a big circle, encompassing Central Asia, all the many of the Turkish caliphates, and I forget the names of these places, but you know what I'm talking about. They all end in Stan, S-T-A-N. And all of this stuff, the Chinese finally became, the overlords of all of this. And if you look at the book I'm reading, he points out two things that are crippling to the world civilizations at that time. It was the onslaught of the Moors and the Black Death. And I'm not doing anything to throw anybody under the bus. But according to this book, the Black Death emanated from about here, which is looks like an area a couple hundred miles below present-day Beijing, inland, probably a couple hundred miles. Okay? And it went like this. And it went like this. And it went like this. Okay? And then all these places, it would go like this. This is the Black Plague. Up into Europe, never emanating from outside it, according to this book. All right? And you could make an argument that the book shows a few Black Plagues coming out of, I think, India or somewhere, maybe Burma, Malay. Okay, but personally, I think, this is my theory now, because at the same time, the Kublai Khan was moving down, taking over, and he had penetrated and gotten into Burma at that time. He got into a lot of other places too, but he could have brought the plague with him, and then it went back towards the direction that Kublai Khan came from. So the plague was one that really, really negatively impacted the civilized world, and the onslaught of the Moorish, invasions all over, up and down. And actually, if you look at it, these arrows of these activities, one by man, one by a biological organism, they kind of look like they're in sync. They do. And I'm not going to say it, but I'm totally concerned about the emanation of the Black Plague from this area, because it certainly is not that far off the mark of what we got going on right now. But so next time we appear, I'll try to have this all washed up, so when I want to note where something is, I can note it a little clearer. And I think that's all I'm going to do for today. We talked about the canal, the Grand Canal. We talked about the need. If you're going to talk about the Silk Road, you got to start all the way back. Asia Minor, the Balkans, Eastern Europe, Constantinople, okay, Antioch, Damascus, Baghdad. All these places touched on the Silk Road. Venice, Pisa, Genoa, all these places. Okay, so you can't even get started on what we maybe come to think of as the Silk Road, which is basically roads through Central Asia and on into China. You got to get there's 1,000 years of history before you get to that point. It's so these folks are now starting to revise history, that the true gigantic civilizing property of civilization was indeed in the East, not in the West. Now, I'm not claiming sides here. I'm just saying there seems to be a movement about that's starting to point to the history of this major area of the world, and that had been going on for major centuries, way longer than the West. That indeed the East was the grand star, the great star of civilization. Now, things change, of course, so, I can't even want to or believe I could try to say what is the dominating civilization going on today. I can't, because if I look into the history of the world today, I see so much confusion and chaos and people just not seemingly doing the right things, that I think maybe the whole world has lost its compass, so to speak, and there is no great civilization to point to. I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. I don't think anybody does, really. But, thank God, I'll say it again, thank God for the historians, because they know a lot more than we do, and hopefully some of these bright people are advising the government, bureaucrats, and and putting in their mind the proper course to take to solve this problem, to solve that problem, what direction the world should take, etc., etc. Hopefully. Now, that being said, I'm going to go click the little red button. Thanks for listening. Come and see me the next time.